Welcome to VML Season 8. My name is Filipa and I'm joined by Arya today. First of all, we would like to thank our sponsors, Wizard of the Coast and Good Luck I5. Without them, this would not be possible, so thank you so much. Today, we are added to week number 2 of the tournament and we have a lot of interesting matches to feature today. What do you think, Arya?
I'm really excited. I mean, last week we saw a good mix of different decks that were, a lot of off meta decks doing well. So I'm really excited to see if we can follow this week up. I don't think we have any five-color humans this time, nothing that wild, but hopefully something interesting still.
Yes, and indeed interesting because today a lot of all the matches that we are covering, I think we only have one Esper mid-range, so we have a very good variety this week. What do you think about that, of the fact that we only have one Esper mid-range?
I think that it's like a sign of how the meta has been shifting a little since the World Championships. Esper was maybe the most played deck there, but Grixis did better and it's been seeing like more people playing it since. Also, like a lot of people are branching out because now that there's an established meta, it's possible to build brews that try and attack that meta rather than just playing one of the top decks because you know what you have to attack rather than just trying to beat a wide field.
Perfect. And today, you, the viewer there watching us right now, needs to pay attention because we have some giveaways prepared for you during the stream. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we are going to start with a match between Jay versus Autumn and is Jan midrange versus Grixis midrange. What do you think of this matchup, Arya?
So it's interesting because you mentioned before the stream started that how similar these decks were. They're both like this black red shell, and then there's these green support cards and these blue support cards. And I think I lean a little bit towards the Grixis mid range side. Cards like Make Disappear are really important as cheap interaction for like the 5 and 6 mana spells John midrange wants to resolve, and I think that gives Grixis an advantage.
Exactly. The fact that they have the counter spell is really important there. Both of these players are on Division 8 and they really want to do well this week. What do you think it's going to be the biggest surprise in the Gent deck and why are they playing green, do you think?
I think the biggest draw to green is how much late game staying power the deck has. Like the Grixis versions, Esper versions, all eventually run out of cards. But with stuff like Workshop War Chief is like expensive top end, and Rivetier's Charm, which can draw 3 cards, which is really hard to come back against. The deck has like a lot more staying power, and that's I think the main reason you want to be playing green. So if the game goes very very long, then I'd expect the Jund player to be winning.
That seems great. And it seems like we are probably going to get a very interesting matchup here because both decks want to go kind of the long game, both like a mid range kind of deck and very similar, just with some differences. What do you think of this list that Autumn brought us this week? Is that our typical Grixis mid range, right? That we have been seeing doing very well lately.
It's mostly typical mid range, but one card I'm very excited to see is Solkanar. This is not a card that sees much play at standard, mostly more of a limited bomb, but it's just a huge haymaker from Grixis. And normally, those sort of haymakers, you need to play green for Workshop War Chief. But I mean, 5 mana powerful threat that like Grixis has that's also capable of keeping up and taking over in the long game. I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and we asked some interesting questions to our players this week in the questionnaire. We asked what cards they are most excited from Brothers War, and how do you think like Brothers Wars is going to change standard? So Brother War pre-release is actually this weekend. It's happening in store before actually it's happening on Arena, which is kind of new because before it was happening on Arena before. How do you think, Arya, that Brothers War is going to shape the meta?
I mean, I think both our players here said that, artifact decks are something they're excited to see. I think we might see a little bit of that. Maybe control decks will also get a little better because we have a 3 mana board wipe in Brotherhood's End. So it would be interesting to see some decks that maybe prey on the mid range decks because right now everything in standard is mid range.
Yes, definitely. I think it's going to be a big shift here in the meta game, and I'm really excited to see. I'm always excited to see changes in when the new set comes. And this one, I just played the pre-release today. It seems really, really, really fun. So I'm really excited. And I think we're about to head for our game number one between Jay and Autumn here. Uh, Oh, look at this end. So it looks like the Grixis player here doesn't have red, and they have a lot of red cards in end, but they also have the artifact to draw them cards, while the Jund player looks like they have a hand that doesn't really have green. What do you think about this? Again, like the mana might be punishing here.
Yeah, I don't think the Jun deck needs green till pretty late, so it's a solid keep from Jay to decide to keep a hand that maybe can't cast the green spells early, but cast them later. And for the Grixis deck, Bankbuster is really your best play on turn two, so it's fine if there's not red mana right now.
Yeah, and it looks like Autumn here has a great curve, like turn three Fable. It's what you want to do in this kind of decks, Fable being one of the key cards. And Jay, on the other end, as an Invoke Despair in end, and this card can end games, right?
Yeah, I would. I'm interested to see whether Jay is able to get an opportunity to resolve that invoke, because if she does, it's going to be very hard. That card's just backbreaking in any version of this matchup. But against
Hmm.
2 mana counter spells like Make Disappear, it might be a little hard for the Grixis deck to push through.
Yeah, and Jay already being kind of rewarded for playing Gent because they just play this card that deals damage, and if it does deal excess damage, it does destroy an enchantment. So they did destroy the Fable with excess damage, which is really good. So already being rewarded for playing the green here.
Yeah, for the most part, it's pretty rough for decks like this to play. It's pretty hard for decks like this to play a long game against cards like Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is very good taking over the game. So definitely a huge edge for Jay to have a neat 1-for-1 answer for that. That isn't trading down. Normally, if you're cutting down a token, if you're like killing the Fable once it flips, you're spending 2 cards, 3 cards to deal with the Fable, and so answering it 1-for-1 is very nice.
Yeah, and here Autumn playing Corpse Appraiser. This card has been really good. One of the reasons that these players do choose to go with Grixis. It does generate card advantages, which is really important. And it looks like Jay on the other side as the Invoke Despair on end. And I wonder if they are going to use it. It looks like they are not.
Yep.
Would you use the Invoke Despair here, or you think the Unleash the Inferno is a good choice?
I think Unleash is a good choice. I think Jay is being very patient with her invoke. She is not playing into Make Disappears, which she knows Autumn has. And Unleash answers the Bankbuster here, so there's like maybe a little less card advantage happening, while also avoiding Jay having to play into a Make Disappear that Autumn has also very carefully left up and represented all of this game.
Yeah, and Unleash the Inferno being great again, already destroyed a Fable and also a Bankbuster just for free, right? Like additionally to the removing the creature, which is really good. And here we see Autumn being aggressive, using the lands to generate tokens and start attacking.
Yeah, and this is a interesting play from Autumn. Really heads up one where she could leave up Make Disappear in this spot to play around Invoke. But what this play lets her do is she recognizes that if she sacrifices just one of the 1/1s, that's fine. It's not a big deal to sacrifice, and it lets her start applying pressure. And if Jay casts Invoke like she did, sure, Jay went up on cards, but it's a pretty big tempo swing to be spending 5 mana and not affecting the board, or barely
Ex-
affecting it.
exactly. And here looks like Jay had a duress and she chose to remove the make disappear, recognizing that Autumn just has removal, and right now Jay doesn't have any creature, so it's not looking too good for Jay, you would say.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard spot to be in, and this is one of the Grixis deck strength. There might not be top end haymakers the way Green has, but the deck just draws cards the whole game. All the cards in your deck just draw more cards one way or another. And in the late game, it sometimes means your opponent runs out of cards and you do not, like this.
And here we have Workshop Warchief, another reason that this deck runs the green. And uh, what do you think of this card? Do you think it's good enough to be running in this kind of deck?
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty big reason to play green, and I think probably good enough to cut it. It's a little awkward against cards like Make Disappear, so this is specifically the matchup where it can be awkward. But it's if it resolves against a lot of the decks not running Make Disappear in the Jund mirrors against other red black decks, it's just really hard to deal with one for one.
Yeah, and Autumn here just invoke this pair, Jay, and right now things are definitely not looking good for Jay. Autumn has a lot of cards in hand, and the only thing Jay has is the workshop, which it's actually really good, but might not be enough. And just going for the concession here, what a game! And as you said, Grixis having a bit of the lead there, having the chance to keep the counter open. And how would you sideboard here in this matchup?
So I think what Jay really needs to be doing is keeping track of those make disappears. So bringing in something like Bankbuster is a really good plan because you don't want too many clunky expensive threats. So trying to have more card advantage that comes down early, more threats that come down early is really what it's all about for Jund in sideboarding for this matchup.
And on the Grixis side, what would you sideboard?
I think so. I think the Grixis side is kind of the other side of that coin, where you just want to have as much efficient interaction. You want to be countering your opponent's 4, 5, 6 drops with your cheap spells. There's a lot of card advantage. We saw last game Grixis didn't run out of cards, and being able to actually leverage that is a big strength of Grixis in this pseudo mirror.
Yeah, and we are seeing opening ends now. It looks like mana wise, they both have a good amount of lands, and Autumn already has some of the biggest threats: Fable, Invoke, Despair. Not having the turn to creature that they probably would like to see. On the other side, Jay does have a great hand to make some pressure. We see Shieldred on hand, the Warchief, Fable, and here make disappear. So
And
is
this is this. Oh, go
I was just saying that now they are playing the Fable, which is like a card that can just finish games and go so well in this deck, and one of the main reasons Rakdos variants have been playing so much.
And I think this is a good example of the sort of haymakers that that Jund has access to that Grixis does not, because Autumn's creatures all fairly small, and then we see Shieldred, Warchief. Warchief is put together really hard for the Grixis deck to beat because you just don't have things that go over the top as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And here, one thing that I've noticed is that Jade doesn't have the fifth land, which it's it's kind of important to start building that mana base. And both these decks don't want to be missing land drops, especially with two warships on hand. Although they can play it with the Bleeze cost, right, which is really interesting.
Yeah, the Blitz cost on Warchief is I think 6 mana, so maybe not coming down for a turn or two. But yeah, definitely one of the downsides of the Jund deck is you have a lot of expensive spells, so you really need to hit your land drops. And games like this, if the Jund deck stumbles, then that's what the Grixis deck is very good at capitalizing on.
And based on the board state, who do you think has the advantage here now?
I'd say it's probably Jay on the Jund deck. There's no answer to the Shield Red for Autumn, and I mean, if they can't answer Shield Red will just kill them.
Yeah, and Evoke Despair is not that good when a creature dies, you make a 4/4, right?
Yeah,
So
it lines up quite poorly into Warchief, and I think that's one of the main appeals of this Jund deck is Warchief goes over the top of other top end like Invoke Despair just because it lines up so well against it.
it definitely seems like a very interesting choice, and I'm really glad to see different, like, although Rakdos is very popular, it's nice to see that it has variants. Like, you can go with Grixis, you can go with Jund, you can go with just the pure Rakdos, and you always have different lineups, and it makes these matchups so interesting to watch. Here we see Jay attacking with everything, and a double block from Autumn on the Shieldred. We do know that Jay has the Infernal Grasp, though.
Yeah, and this is a exactly the sort of spot you don't want to get in against a deck like this, against a deck like this Jund deck, because you really don't want to be in a spot where you are forced to leave yourself dead to interaction because you're fallen behind. Like once you're behind, this Grixis deck is not as good at playing catch up as some other variants because most of your cards are more card advantage based and interaction based than just
Yeah.
going over the top.
And we have a good game here, and we are 1-1, which is good because we are going to have a third game. Graveyard Trespasser being played, also a very good card, especially when your opponent is already running low on life and you can drain just for those last points of damage. And would you change anything for game 3, or would you keep the same sideboard?
So I think I'm a big fan of what Jay's doing here. What she's doing is bringing in stuff like cut down on the draw because they recognize that your opponent on the draw you're going to need to answer Blood Tithe Harvesters onto. So adopting a different strategy on the draw because your opponent's Blood Tithe Harvesters are going to come down first is definitely pretty appealing.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, and it looks like Jay doing a great job sideboarding here. I think Autumn didn't sideboard last game, if I'm not incorrect, or at least we didn't see much sideboard. Do you think they would change anything?
I think maybe seeing some more blue spells come in, spells to either counter Jay's top end or maybe card draw like Kaito. But really, every card in the Grixis main deck is so good; it's sometimes hard to take anything out.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Tira Thunder yet, which it might be very good in this matchup, right? And we see that Jay is keeping two of them. It would be an interesting card to see play. I only see it played limited, like you said.
Yeah, Terra Sunder is important, particularly against this version of Grixis, because there is that Soul Canara's top end that Jay does have to deal with at some point. So, while 4 mana answer generally pretty bad against Grixis because of how low to the ground they are, recognizing the opponent has two Shield Rids, two Soul Canaras, so four top end threats you absolutely have to answer, and bringing in removal accordingly is very heads up. Is a very heads up play from Jay.
And we are seeing now the opening ends. It looks like Autumn only has two spells, a Stroke and a Shieldred, so a pretty late start when you are on the play. And it looks like Jay has a good balance between spells like Duress, Removal, Fable. What do you think of these ends, Arya?
Yeah, it's a slightly awkward hand from Autumn. I can understand the temptation to keep when the hand really has like two of her best cards in the matchup, but it's definitely going to line up poorly against this duress and is a little slow for me to be comfortable with in this
Yeah,
matchup.
Autumn getting a braid here, which is a good source of removal, but we know that Jay now has the duress and will be able to see that Autumn is actually running low on early game. What we would like to see here from Autumn would be, for example, a Fable to put some pressure, Harvester, and yeah, turn 3 not being able to do anything, it's not ideal for the Grixis player. And we see that Jay can now do the Fable, and unfortunately Stroke does not counter it. What do you think of Stroke instead of the other counter, the Make Disappear?
I think the Grixis deck wants make disappear is definitely better, but you want as much of both as possible. So Autumn is running both cards post pod, and I think that makes a lot of sense for this matchup where you really want to counter top end.
And we see here that Autumn spent the turn playing the Shieldred, but Jay did have Infernal Grasp to destroy it. And I think the interaction Shieldred Infernal Grasp has been one that I've seen a lot this season. I think like it's always when you play your Shieldred, you have to pray your opponent does not have removal. And now Jay does have their own Shieldred, so we do know that Autumn has a Make Disappear on the other side though. What do you think here of the choice of playing Fable instead of Shieldred?
So I really like that, and I really like the line. I really like the line Jay took specifically, where she baited out a make disappear by not playing out a land before Fable, and that let Shieldred resolve, or that let Shieldred resolve in a turn or two, which is very very strong.
And we see Liliana now, and Autumn does not have more counters. They do have an out-tower land, so what do you think of these kind of lands that have been like playing in every deck, the lands?
They're definitely very powerful, but they come at a real cost. I mean, in this spot, Autumn has an Invoke Despair hand that she really, really wants to cast. It'll get her back into the game, draw her cards, but it's just not going to do that because Otawara didn't tap for black mana, so she just didn't have the mana to cast it.
Yeah, but it looks like she does have the mana now, and Jay like keep playing the Liliana, making sacrifice the corpse appraiser and start attacking. We do see now that Autumn got a grasp, but it looks like it's going for the despair. Despair you're being really good, right? Enchantment creature, planeswalker. Although Jay decides to sacrifice the enchantment as the creature, so that way they keep the shieldred, which is a very good decision.
Yeah, and this is exactly the thing we were talking about where, Jund has these haymakers at the top end that Grixis really has to find a way to answer, otherwise they take over the game on their own.
Yeah, and it looks like Autumn always seem in a disadvantage, but then just turning the game with Invoke Despair, and that's how good this card is. You play your first Invoke Despair when your opponent is winning, just to keep even, and then your second one is just you're on top now. Unleash here being really good again, like destroying the creature and also the enchantment. Who do you think is favored here?
I think I'd have to lean towards the Jund deck slightly. The Otawara and the Takenuma in hand for Autumn might change that, but something like a Workshop War Chief to blitz off the top can just end the game at any point. And so that makes me maybe lean a little towards Jund, but I think it's really neck and neck. It's all about these next few turns.
For sure. And it looks like Autumn now as a children in end. Um, Jay here still can cycle and start getting something. Okay. It looks like Jay draw is she's own like children, which is really good, but not playing it right now.
Yeah, very restrained balance play from Jay, really making sure to play around, making sure to play around, um, make disappear, recognizing that even a turn later, this shield red is going to be good. So there's no reason not to wait on it.
Yeah, Jay playing really careful because she could just play the harvester right now and chose not to, like concerned about the make disappear, right? Choosing to play it a turn later. And now Autumn, like this is where Grixis starts to shine. Corporate Praiser gets you cards. It starts getting you value. Really looking for, I would say, a removal spell to get rid of that children. And now there is the make disappear that Jay has been playing around. And Shieldred attacking. Would you defend here with the Shieldred if you were on Jay's side?
I don't think so. I think Autumn's life total is low enough that you really want to try and pressure the shield red in play. Prevent like use your shield red to make sure Autumn can't build up a life total buffer with drawing cards. And so I think that makes Jay's shield red maybe a little more valuable than Autumn's, which might be why Autumn chose to attack with her shield red and offer the trade.
And here Jay gets a Trespasser, which might be really good because let's see, Autumn is at 4 life, now becoming at 3 after this Trespasser resolved. In order to make disappear resolve and Jay not having mana, they would have to sacrifice the Shieldred. So it's a cost they were not willing to pay. And now this Trespasser can change the game. What do you think of this card?
Yeah, I think the Trespasser is pretty much lights out here because it even threatens, well, draining Autumn for lethal if these shield reds end up trading off.
And here we see a good game, and we got a win from the Jund player that actually lost game one and then came back with game two and three. What do you think of this matchup? What do you think of the games that we just saw?
It kind of went pretty similarly to how we discussed. The top end from Jund was really helpful with Unleash the Inferno, Shieldred, and such, really doing a good job going over the top of what Grixis is doing. We didn't see very many workshop war chiefs, but I mean, when we saw them, they were good. And unfortunately for a Grixis player, they didn't see their top end, so that really hurts. It all comes down to who draws that top end, and where it only happened on one side, it's not surprising that Jund won.
Yeah, congratulations, Jay, on the win. But both players doing a great job here. I don't think we saw any misplay from both sides. They both played really careful, and it looks like they were really confident on their own version of the deck. So, congratulations to both players. And we have a giveaway for you now. So, I'm going to tell you all about this giveaway. So, this giveaway is for one commander package for face to face tour weekend in Toronto or Calgary. So you can choose between the free commander deck basic pack or a free upgrade from basic to the ultimate package in the tournament. So in the face-to-face weekend Toronto or Calgary. If you want to enter, you just have to type in chat F2F and you are entering for this amazing prize. I love playing Commander in my free time. It's really fun to do. And if you are attending this event and if you happen to be in Canada, it would be great if you would enter this giveaway.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for providing the giveaway.
it's really sweet this is happening, and just a reminder again that these have to be collected in person. So if you're not going to one of these events, you should not enter the giveaway.
Exactly. So this is for somebody that is going to either the Calgary or the Toronto events in Canada. So the face-to-face tour weekend. And really nice to see that Magic events are finally coming back because I saw that some of you from the VML were in the Magic 30. How was that experience, Arya?
It was really great. So I was at the VML booth, and it was really great to meet so many members of the community. The area was always full. We had a play area, and there was just always people playing there. We got to meet so many cool new people and meet people in person as part of who've been like such important parts of the community who had only interacted with online, and it was really a fantastic experience. It,
Yeah,
it
and
really made me happy about what the VML does.
I saw the pictures and they really filled my heart. It's so good that we are having these events back. And you seemed so happy, Ari, as well. And everyone on the VML representing there. And so many people that I saw were enjoying the booth. So, really nice that we were able to make that happen. And the VML is doing really well in that sense. And we are now going for our game number two. So, this is Freddie versus Slithermuse. So, Gruul aggro versus Esper midrange, and I'm really excited to see this Gruul mid-range deck. What do you think of it?
I think this is a really interesting deck. We saw a similar version of this deck last week, where someone was playing a slightly bigger version of the deck with some of the 6 mana werewolves like Averbrook Caretaker and Tovolas Huntmaster. And this is slightly low to the ground, but still some ways bigger than the Esper deck is going. You want your creatures to outsize this. Quirion Beast Scholar, really powerful card, less of a werewolf focus on this one. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this matchup plays out because this deck is very good at punishing draws from Esper that are slightly clunky. And Esper is not the best deck on the defensive. So this might be a really good tool to fight Esper by bringing a deck that forces Esper on the back foot and pressures it really well.
Yeah, and this is kind of what Freddie is saying here on the question that she answered about what you like about the deck this week. So it really looks like they chose a very interesting deck, and they probably tested a lot with it because it's super outside the box. And the cards to watch out, like we have here, for example, the Quirion Beast Caller, which is a card I really liked, but I kind of stopped seeing playing, and I haven't seen playing much in standard lately. Seems like we've been filled with these decks that play black, invoke despair, like Esper, Grixis, Junt, Rakdos, and it's kind of refreshing to see a deck that is not playing black. And who do you think it's favored here between this Gruul midrange and Esper midrange?
It's hard to say because it's a pretty close matchup. There's definitely some things about Esper that line up well against Gruul, Like we're seeing a lot of creatures with 3 or more toughness that are very good at blocking those ascendant pack leaders, for example. But I think I'd have to give the edge to Gruul, because if you look at Esper's interaction, there's make disappear, destroy evil, and infernal grasp, but none of those removal spells play well when you're behind. They're not good if you're behind on board. Then a counter spell's not good. The destroy for toughness only sometimes works against the Gruul deck, and infernal grasp paying 2 life really not what you want to be doing against Gruul. So the fact that the removal from the Esper deck plays so poorly when behind, but it makes me think the Gruul deck is at least slightly favored, at least if they are on the play.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here that Slithermuse said about their deck this week that they tuned it a bit this week and actually turned out to be good against or become better against this Gruul matchup. And they refer about a couple of copies of Knockout Blow in the sideboard. What do you think of this card in this matchup, Arya?
I think it's a really good choice from Slithermuse, specifically because it helps shore up the issues that Esper has. We talked about all this removal that's not good from behind, but Knockout Blow against a red deck is a 1 mana kill an attacking creature, gain 2 life, and that's really, really good from behind and can maybe help make up for and subsidize some of these clunkier removal spells that the Esper deck is running. So, really good choice on Slithermuse's part.
Yeah, and this is going to be a really interesting matchup we are going to see. And once again, don't forget to submit if you want to participate in our giveaway. We are going to announce a winner in the end of this game number 2. And I think we are going to start watching now this match. Seeing both opening ends, we see a mole from the Gruul player side, and unfortunately, maybe a mole again. Would you keep this end just with Lightning Strike?
I think you have to go to 5. The Gruul deck really
Yeah.
needs to be applying early aggression, and neither of the first 2 hands did that. So good discipline mulligans from Freddie.
Yeah, Freddie here, like recognizing like mulling is not ideal, but this end cannot get me far, right? And really, really like brave here, because sometimes when I'm in this position, I really don't like to mull, but sometimes we do have to, and that's why mulls exist. But is this end looking much better than the previous one?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's going to be hard to win on a multi 5. It always is. But something powerful like Halana and Elena that can take over the game on its own is exactly the sort of card you want against Esper.
Yeah, and here we see removal grasp in action, and next turn we have already a Rafin that can enter, and this card can just get so crazy if it's not answered to. And unfortunately, no answer here from Freddie, like only able to play on 4th turn. A really rough start there, mainly because of the mulligan. What do you think would be the best card that Freddie could draw to maybe make them come back from this game?
I think the thing they probably want to see most at some point soon is a copy of Tovalar. Something to draw
Mm-hmm.
cards would be really powerful to get them back into this game. But unfortunately for Freddy, this is a deck. This is a part where the Esper deck shines the most. There's just so much removal that is good when you're ahead, and the deck is very good at keeping the cards flowing with Rafine Connive in a way that makes it hard to come back once you're behind.
Yeah, and this is why this is one of the most played decks. Like it has good threats, cheap removal, and it is such a good deck, and it has played so much lately. It was the most played deck in the worlds by far, correct?
Yeah, it was 69% of the world's metagame, and I mean, like you said, this is why it's like it's just so powerful at making sure it stays in the game when it starts ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe the only deck that can kind of go against these Esper, it's the Rakdo builds, right? Because at least in my perspective, when I've been playing these Rakdo builds, I've been doing pretty well against the Esper mid-range deck. And here we have, it's not too bad. Like we have to consider Freddie started on a mull to 5, and they were able to get some good draws. Here, having the protection, it's really important. And that ascendance attacking for 6 damage.
Yeah, and that was kind of perfect for Freddie because I mean anything else, if the Halana and Elena gets removed, if there's if it gets countered, probably very hard for Freddie to win from that spot. But drawing exactly the safekeeping at the right time gave them a really good chance at this game in which they were incredibly behind earlier.
Yes, exactly. And even though Slithermuse did have an answer, now still was a very good draw from Freddie here. And you're considering attacking with both.
Yeah, and smart play from Freddie recognizing that if they attack with both, then the Muse, if they're blocking if they're eating the 2-2 with Rafine, then they're not double blocking the pack leader. And that leaves the Muse with two bad options, either taking damage or like making a bad double block.
Exactly. And now Slithermuse tapped here and an attack again. That little creature that started as a 2-1 certainly did grow fast, right? Uh, this is one of the magic of this card, and it's good to see it play again.
Yeah, it's definitely impressive showing from back leader. Also, I want to take a minute to shout out the huge raid we got from Anurag over at the Magic Summit coverage. Welcome, friends. We're currently covering week 2 of the VML, and a reminder that there's a giveaway in progress. So if you're in Canada and want to enter a giveaway for, I think it was a basic package.
It is either a free commander basic package or a free upgrade from basic to ultimate package. And you can redeem these rewards face to face on the tour weekend in either Toronto or Calgary. So you just have to type F2F in chat and you'll be entering the giveaway, I think. Oh, Wandering Emperor. This card punishes aggro decks so much, right, Arya?
Yeah, and I think at this point it's really the aspect really just putting the nail in the coffin. So the Muse is so far ahead on cards, far ahead on board. There's really not much by way of counterplay from Freddie. The red green deck doesn't have these big top end haymakers to try and come back from a spot like this.
But honestly, I was surprised Freddie could take this game this long, considering they did move to 5. So it was kind of impressive to see that the deck did recover a bit, right?
Yeah,
But not enough against the Esper, unfortunately. Like, Esper is just like such a deck that if you have the right draws, like, you have so many removal that, as we said, it becomes really difficult for these aggro decks.
Yeah, I think this game was really a testament to the power of Halana and Lena, where, like you said, Freddie's staying in this despite a multi-5 on the draw, and that's only because of Halana and Lena. That card just was such a huge swing and almost turned the game around in a single turn it stayed alive for. So definitely a card to watch out for in subsequent games as well.
Yeah, and I think at one point Slithermuse it was at 6 live or something like that. So I think if Freddie didn't mull to 5 and began with a 7 and opener, we might have actually seen a different game here.
Yeah, definitely the aggro deck really suffering for running out of cards early. And I think if that aggression, like you said, if it had been backed up by maybe just a few more cards, it probably would have been enough for the Gruul deck to get there.
Yeah, and see, like now a lightning strike, which is another form to make that last damage, but when you're so behind, it doesn't do much. What would you sideboard here on the Gruul player side?
So I think that safekeeping, like we saw Freddie already bring in, is definitely something you want. You have these haymakers in Tovala and Halana and Elena, and you really, really want to keep them alive. So that's a good shout. Beyond that, really, there's a lot of mid-range threats in the sideboard. Most of them are a little appealing, but you generally want to be lower to the ground and putting Esper on the back foot because going into the late game, the Esper deck has a lot of tools. So I like keeping it light with the sideboarding, just bringing in safekeeping in another card or two and calling it at that.
Yeah, and we saw safekeeping is a card that can just turn games, as you said. especially Esper having so much removal, and we knowing that Slithermuse is going to probably bring the knockouts, right? So uh, being an amazing card to protect your creatures here, and the wolf deck being on the play, it is really really good, right? It can just blow off Esper, because we actually saw that Esper had a pretty decent curve, removal, Raffine on 3. So if Esper stumbles a bit, Gruul does have a good chance.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case on the play. I agree with what you said 100%. Where it's really all about Esper stumbling, and I mean everything about the Gruul deck is set up to enable that. With Tamiyo's safekeeping really punishing sometimes if the Esper deck's a little too reliant on one piece of removal.
Mhm. And what do you think of these two farewells in this matchup?
Farewell's an interesting one. At first glance, it doesn't seem great because you don't want a 6 mana card. But the fact that it exiles and gets around Tamiyo's safekeeping, I think, makes it appealing because there's definitely boards. You saw what happened last time with Halana and Lena making a 1 drop a 6/5. And there's definitely boards where you can get really far behind. So Farewell being a way to clean that up through Tamiyo's safekeeping is what makes it appealing, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree what you said. And Farewell being a card that can just swing the game. Like if Esper is a bit behind but still staying alive, Farewell can like turn the game around. And what cards would you cut that you don't think are that good here for Esper player?
So we've already seen some of the slower cards cut, and I think maybe just more cards in that general range. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe one of the 4 drops cut or Trespasser. Trespasser doesn't affect the board very much, and the Gruul deck's not really trying to remove it, so that seems like another option.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Tamio is going to be again like such an important card in this matchup. Like this card punishes aggro decks so much. I meant the Wandering Emperor. Like the Wandering Emperor entering on turn 4 flash speed, like being able to exile a creature that's attacking, gaining 2 life, and then like on the following turn just start putting counters. It's just really good.
Yeah, it's definitely the best card against a Gruul deck like this. We're also seeing a really smart play from Slithermuse. They're cutting a land on the draw. Now, this is not something we see happening a lot. A lot of people will submit the same deck on the play or the draw, but on the draw, you have one extra look for lands. You get to draw one extra card because you get to draw on turn one. And that means it's very reasonable to try and play just one fewer land and hope that's fine.
Yeah, unfortunately, Slithermuse got only 1 land in the first end opening, and now 3 lands, but no black. On the other hand, we see that Freddie does have a very, very good hand here.
Yeah, and this is exactly what you said a few minutes ago, Filipa, about how this deck can really punish the Esper deck stumbling, and the Esper deck stumbling, and the Gruul deck's just putting an end to the game really quickly.
Yeah, Gruul deck just doing what the Gruul deck does, putting creatures on the board, starting to attack, and hopefully finishing the game before Slithermuse can find their answers.
And this is also a little bit of what I was talking about earlier with the Esper deck being bad at playing from behind. Once you're on the spot, cards like Wedding Announcement, Infernal Grasp, not as good when you're looking down three creatures at a time and your life total's under pressure. So
For
definitely a
sure.
vulnerability of the deck.
For sure, especially because if you don't want to take all this damage, you have to use the token to block. It's not going to kill anything, so you're just preventing some life loss at this point. Oh, he did kill the Ascendancy, but still looks like Freddie here has a big advantage. Although we see the card that we were talking about right now, like the Wandering Emperor, ready to come at flash instant speed.
Yeah, though I think it may be a little too late here with All In on Nightside being just a huge tempo swing.
For sure. And I really like this Planeswalker. I haven't seen play in a long time, but it's a really aggressive and good Planeswalker. but just being exiled here as we suspected. But still, we see that Slithermuse is at 3 life now. And what draw can they get to get them out of their ear?
I really don't think there is anything in that deck.
Yeah, we already know there's a Rending Flame on Freddie's side. And here, Slithermuse just recognizing, okay, this Wandering Emperor is not going to do much anymore. Let me just create a blocker that actually it's going to get pumped by the wedding announcement, which another reason that this card is so good, eventually your all creatures get buffed.
Yeah, and I mean, if the Esper deck makes it through a stage like this, then it's at this point that it starts getting really powerful with wedding announcement really playing to the board. But unfortunately, Slithermuse is likely just dead this turn.
Yeah, especially with that Rending Flame dealing 2 damage phase. So now this out the Dawn Sky really needs to find something. And it did find a very good card.
Yeah, it definitely problematic here. It actually buys Slithermuse some time because they get to make reasonable blocks here. Without Ertai, most blocks were going to be chump blockers with any creature off the top, but Ertai specifically is a problem.
For sure. And here we see that Slithermuse does have, for example, Infernal Grasp in End, but at 1 life not able to cast it ever, right? Unless they manage to gain some life before.
And yeah, at this point, I think it's just a matter of whether Slithermuse, whether Freddie draws something in time to actually close out this game before that Path of Peril comes down.
Yeah, and here we see a Reckless Stormkeeper and Stormseeker, and it does have Ace, which is really important. And it's Knight.
Yeah,
Being
something
Knight here really good.
something is worth noting though. We see that knockout blow in Slithermuse's hand, and that gains 2 life, which then lets them be able to cast the Infernal Grasp. So a hand of very live removal spells, and depending on how Freddie ends up attacking, they could get really punished by that.
That's a great point, Arya. And we were talking about this card since the beginning. It's the card that even Slithermuse mentioned on the questionnaire, right? About what they think about this deck this week. And it might actually be the swing back here.
Really, really heads up play from Freddie here, though, recognizing that, okay, the removal spell from Slithermuse from the Esper deck is very likely at this point. So attacking with the only creature that, if it gets removed, is going to put counters on something else, and Slithermuse is going to continue to be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely Freddie here taking advantage of the fact that this is an open deck list, right? And knowing that Slithermuse probably did bring this blowout post sideboard.
Yeah, and
Here's
it's an awkward spot, definitely, because to gain the life to cast that Infernal Grasp, Slithermuse has to effectively waste the knockout blow.
yeah. Also worth noting that knockout blow is not enough, so having to grasp, as you said, so like 2 spells just to get rid of 1 creature that then distributes counters. It's not a great spot to be in, and back at 1 life.
Yeah, and particularly bad given that Stormseeker still going to have Trample next turn. So,
Yeah.
uh, so the Muse kind of needs to do something about that, and they don't really have options.
Yeah, and not only it does have the trample, there's also the haste, giving haste to another creature. And here, Slithermuse just recognizing that and decided, okay, let's start over again and let me just wipe the board. With a Raffine in hand. Do you think Raffine will be enough here?
Um, Probably not. It's definitely it's at this point in the game, any creature for Freddy will be enough to win because just 2 haste attackers.
And here, Freddie considering what to do.
And
And just
honestly, just testament to the really strong play from Slithermuse that they're not dead yet. This game maybe should have been over several turns ago, but turn after turn, they found the line to survive. They played out the Rafine. They recognized, those last two cards in Freddie's hand, they need to be dead for Slithermuse to have any chance at this game.
mhm.
So they played accordingly, and they managed to stay into the game so much longer than they should have.
Oh, another one. And you know what card does exactly one damage that I'm thinking of? That I think Freddie's playing? Let me just make sure.
Is
Kumano,
it
right?
is it Kumano?
Yeah, Kumano, right? Enters, gives one damage, game is over. That would be interesting to see. Another wedding announcement.
And at this point, Slithermuse is starting to stabilize. The time for Freddie to draw something is running out because that Rafine's going to start drawing cards, and that's going to be a problem.
It's definitely going to be a problem, and some unfortunate draws here for Freddie, right? Like getting two of this creature and then like also land. It's definitely not the spot that Freddie wants to be when the opponent is at one life. And here now we see an egg angel, I think, being able to remove something eventually. Definitely not a great spot, another land.
Yeah, and
And
we're now approaching the point at which Slithermuse is just going to be able to end the game in 2 turns. This wedding announcement's going to keep making tokens, and with Rafine Connive, that's a lot of damage over a couple of turn cycles.
exactly. So I think Freddy's out is the commando that we were talking about.
I think Freddie also has a bunch of lightning strikes in their deck, so they have a few different outs.
You have a point there. Lightning Strike is definitely another way to end this game. But we know that Slithermuse does have some ways to gain life, right? Included the Sheldred that they just drew.
Yeah, and the Shieldred's going to gain them 2 life this turn because they attack with 2 creatures, so the wedding announcement's going to draw a card, and now they're out of Kamano range.
And now they're threatening Lethal Extern, and we see the Lightning Strike out of the top. You were so right, Arya, predicting this. Such a great call. Yeah, like this was such an interesting game. I thought it was over here, and we are going to have a game number 3. Really, really, really fun to watch. Would you sideboard something different here, being uh, on the draw, or would you just keep the same?
I think all of the mid-range cards like Workshop War Chief, Volatile Arsonist, they're powerful cards that are tempting, so I could see Freddie bringing in any of them. That seems pretty reasonable. But also, the deck was pretty well set up last time. Freddie just got really unlucky to draw back-to-back Halana and Elena's and a lot of lands. I think the deck is already pretty close to perfectly set up to combat Esper if you want to from a Gruul side.
Yeah, and Freddie did have a great start, and actually, Slithermuse didn't have such a great start. But we saw like the power of this Esper deck that kind of preys on going the long game and almost winning there. But definitely such fun to watch that lightning strike out of the top. I think it was the only out, right, Harya?
Yes, I think Lightning Strike was the only out at that point. So really, just 2 of them in the deck. Freddie needed to draw perfectly, and it happened.
That's why we play with the cards, so we can top deck them and win. And here we see, I think, a very aggressive hand for Freddie with two Kumanos, Stormseeker, a safekeeping to protect a creature. On the other side, Slithermuse only has 2 lands,
Yeah,
but
and I think if you're Freddie, this is exactly the sort of hand you want to see. Just like maybe one more land would be nice, but like a lot of early aggression in ways that Slithermuse can't really do much about in turns 1 or 2.
exactly. And now this Liberator enters as a 3/3 because of the Kumano. And here a grasp from Slithermuse. And we are seeing Ruffin enter turn 3, which it's nothing new in the standard. Raffine, just such a power card. Especially in draft. If you ever drafted with this card is insane in limited.
And no slouch in constructed as well, because I mean, Slithermuse's hand here a little clunky, a little awkward, but with Raffine to filter as well as to block if needed, a lot more flexibility to their draw and the ability to maybe loot away some of these cards like Path of Peril that are very situational.
Yeah, and the connive here being super important, considering that Slithermuse doesn't have the fourth land. Although Slithermuse recognizing, okay, maybe this Raffine needs to stay back to block, right?
Yeah, and keeping Raffine back to block important here, but not enough to block the werewolf.
Yeah, and safekeeping being an amazing card as we have been seeing. One of the best cards against this Esper deck that is full of removal. Another Kumano, and still one green mana open for another Safekeeper in case Slithermuse has more removal.
And yeah, I really really like this cautious play from Freddie, recognizing that removal from Slithermuse main thing they're worried about, so making sure to play around it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Freddie here missing the second red source, which means that they cannot cast these good creatures that they have in hand. And kind of awkward to attack here. So just passing the turn. And Slithermuse having this lifelink card can actually be very relevant.
Yeah, definitely the Denic combined with Raffine is a scary combination and hard to race in the long game. It's a little unimpressive against the werewolves here, though.
Yeah, and Freddie not playing anything at least allowed it to become night, which makes the Stormseeker a bigger threat. And here we see Arlene becoming a creature and ready to attack.
And yeah, 7 damage with Arlen is just rough because it's indestructible, so there's no killing it. And I don't think Slithermuse can afford to take that much damage, not with the burn spells they know are in Freddy's deck.
Yeah, and especially the trample makes it really difficult to block because you cannot just block with your 1/1 and go so low on life that then a lightning strike will kill you again. So definitely very interesting here. And it's fun to see that Raffine still hasn't attacked, right? Because the whole point of this Raffine deck is to attack and connive, but it's not doing what it's doing, which is a good sign for Freddie. It means that they are making enough pressure.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about with the way the Esper deck plays, where it's on the back foot. Like there's just not much Slithermuse can do. This Raffine is a 1/4, not the most impressive blocker. 1/1 wedding announcement tokens, not the most effective blockers either, and just overall a pretty rough spot to be in.
Exactly. And here we see again an attack from this Planeswalker that now is a creature. And all the blocks are kind of weird, right? Because this creature has trample. So Raffine being blocking here, like absorbing 4 damage basically. But we see that Slithermuse is already at 4 life, and a removal spell does not do it. And this is the times that farewell is good, right? When these kind of situations that there's a safekeeper in hand, so many creatures, and farewell can just deal with some of the cards.
Yeah. Though that's another strength of Arlen, is Arlen doesn't die to farewell, Arlen doesn't die to a cleaved path of peril, and having that planeswalker that's really hard to deal with, I think makes it nearly impossible for Slithermuse to be able to win here.
And we see an all attacks here, knowing that Freddie has a safekeeping and also a lightning strike. So trying to close out the game here, recognizing this is a little attack. And safekeeping, again, MVP, protecting the card there. And it it looks like this might be it, right?
Yeah, I believe this should be very much lethal for Freddy,
Yeah.
even without the lightning strike in hand.
Yeah, just the trample makes it so difficult to block on Slithermuse side. And Slithermuse is all tapped out, so Freddie knows I can just go for this. And it does look like there's going to be 2 damage from the Erlin and then 3 from the strike, and that seems like GG.
Yeah, even even with the perfect blocks,
Yeah.
Slithermuse will be taking at least 3 points of damage, and there's no way they can live through this.
Yeah. Not even the strike is needed because there's also the 2/2 enchantment attacking that is unblocked. So right now, this is always good enough. Here, this block makes it that 3 damage pass. So supposedly Slithermuse would be at 1, but then this lightning strike should close the game.
Yeah, and solid, really solid play from Slithermuse, making optimal blocks right to the end, but not good enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a game for the Gruul player. And again, it was an interesting match here, and it was really fun to see how Gruul could sideboard and make this work, and actually winning on the draw, which is really impressive, right, Arya?
Yeah, it's what this Gruul deck wants to be doing is taking the aggressive role and forcing Esper to be on the back foot. And on the draw, that's a tall task. The Esper deck has 2 mana, 2/3s, 3 mana, 1/4s. Just a hard stat line to break through when you're on the draw. So really impressive how Freddie managed to play tightly and clinch that one, uh, even on the draw, just by punishing Slithermuse when they stumbled, like you said, when they didn't hit their fourth land. Freddie really was able to drive the game home.
For me, the highlight of this matchup was when Lightning Strike was the top deck and being able to win Freddie the game. What about for you? It was the same moment, the highlight?
Oh yeah, it's got to be the lightning strike off the top.
We gotta thank everyone that participated in the giveaway, and if you did not win, don't worry, we have a chance, so stay tuned in the stream. We'll have another giveaway running soon. And now we are going for our third match of the day, and this Oh, okay. So I'm hearing in the background that actually we do have a winner, and I'm going to announce. Can we get a drum roll? I cannot do a drum roll for my life. And the winner is Alicia Katz. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Congratulations. Please keep in mind this is a face-to-face collection, so you need to go to either the Torrican Toronto or Calgary and collect your prize. Thank you so much. I think probably somebody from production will enter in contact with you, and you can know more about how to redeem this prize. Congratulations. And we are going now for the match number 3 of the day. And it's Neo versus Paige Schmidt and Mono Blue Tempo versus Esper Midrange. What do you think of this deck, Arya?
I think this is a really pivotal matchup to deciding standard because this mono blue deck has come out as like one of the one or two decks that aren't playing black that is really powerful right now. We saw it do really well at the World Championship, beating up on a field of Esper and Grixis decks, and really strong contender for if you don't want to play black in standard, what do you play that can beat it? And Esper, of course, 69% of worlds, most played deck in standard. So really format defining matchup. And both these players are really, really strong players. They're already both 1-0 in their division. And I expect to see some really good magic today from them.
Yes, so they are playing for Division 5 here, and it looks like this is a very interesting choice. And I see that Neo said here on her questionnaire that she loves Mono Blue because it rewards good decision making and clever use of resources. And that is so right because this deck has so much lines that you can make, right? And knowing how, when to play your genes and when to keep your counters up, it's really important. What do you think of this specific match against Esper? You said that it probably is a good match for the blue mono blue tempo player, right?
I think I'd prefer this to be on the mono blue side, but it's really close. It's a very complicated matchup, and it really depends on how games play out. So I wouldn't want to call a favorite in what I think is like going to be a really skill intensive match where it'll come down, I think, a lot to who plays better.
Yeah, and we see here in card swatch the Gene, Make Disappear, and Tolarian Terror. Tolarian Terror usually coming for 1 mana, which is really good, and the Gene not only being a threat that can win the game, also making your spells cheaper, which is really important, because for 4 mana you can play the Gene and keep 1 mana up for a counter, which is really, really important. And on Paige side, on the Esper midrange, it seems like it is very standard Esper mid-range deck. What do you think? Any cards that stand out to you, Arya?
I think it's fairly stock. There's that one copy of Soul Transfer in the sideboard that could be interesting, just more removal spells. Double Duress out of Esper is very important, making sure you can get that removal spell to kill the Jin. I think a lot of this match is going to revolve around Tempest Jin. The other threats like Tolarian Terror aren't as good in this matchup because Esper is very good at putting out a lot of chump blockers with Wedding Announcement and flying over the top with Rafine and AO. So it's all going to be about Haughty Jin, and those duresses to get rid of protection for Jin seem like a card that could be really, really important in this matchup.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be a very interesting matchup to see, and it can go either sides. As you said, both players being very good and experienced players, and it's going to be really interesting to see what decisions they make. And I think we are going to start watching now this match number 3 of the day. And oh, here unfortunately we see for Neo only one make disappear and only lands. So a mule and Paige is deciding to keep the end that seems pretty good. Only 2 lands, but it does seem to have some pressure.
Yep, and I think in Paige's spot, aside from the lands, is like exactly the sort of hand you want to have. Denick is good at erasing opposing threats. There's a bunch of removal. You really just want to run this mono blue deck out of threats, and this hand is very good at doing that.
Yes, and here we saw that Paige used the cut down sorcery speed because we know that Neo is running a bunch of counters. So really, really important here to play things when your opponent is tapped out. And here we start seeing the pain lands having to deal some damage in order for Paige to cast her spells, and no third land yet.
Yeah, and in this spot, in Paige's spot, you really want to land one of those lifelinkers to try and mitigate the life loss from these painlands. Theoretically, Phyrexian Missionary and Denix should play well through painlands, but given she's missing land drops and Neo is doing a good job disrupting our plays, the painlands can be a real cost over a game. But there's a 1 mana 3/2 attacking you every turn.
I completely agree. What do you think of this card Thirst for Discovery here?
I think it's really, really powerful in this deck specifically. Generally speaking, mono blue Thirst for Discovery is a decent card advantage card, but sometimes can be a little bit on the clunky side and not always drawing cards. But out of this deck, all your lands are islands. It's always going to be a draw 3 discard 1, and it's really, really powerful in this deck that's just going through its deck so quickly and playing so much interaction.
And we see here now Rafine entering, and Rafine being really good. First of all, starting to conniving and popping the lifelink creature, which these pain lands have been hurting Paige a lot, but there's some lifelink answers, right? So right now, gaining 3 life, and lifelink being a key aspect here from Paige's side in order to win this matchup. And one thing about Rafine is that it just blocks really well that 3/2 flyer, right, Arya?
Yeah, it does a good job blocking it. I assume it will be answered in some way.
And it looks like it became just a 1/1 with no abilities.
Yeah, and really disciplined play from Neo here. She could be just running out the Hottage in the spot, having a big threat, but recognizing that she should wait till she can play it with slip out the backup so that she actually has some protection. And instead of leaving up Thirst for Discovery is a really strong heads up play from her.
Yes, also threatening that she might have a counter and the opponent might play differently. Here again, another lifelink creature like Missionary having lifelink, and Page deck having lifelink making a completely difference here and already gaining a bunch of life for her. Looks
Yep.
like we have the thirst here, and we are going to see a counter from the Esper side, not what the blue player wants to see.
And this is exactly the thing we were talking about earlier, where Haughty is kind of everything this match is about. It's good at blocking everything on Paige's side of the battlefield. And really, if Paige can't remove it, then it's going to take over the game.
Yeah, and here we have Infernal Grasp, split out the back as a response, but we know there's a make disappear in end. Although Paige needs to casualty, so it needs to sacrifice a creature, and she does.
And
Let's
this
see.
is one of the issues with playing Witness Protection as an answer against a deck with Slip Out the Back is it just gives them a very convenient 1/1 to sacrifice if they need to.
Yeah, and here Impulse needing to find something. Unfortunately, negate and sleep out is not the best. And what card do you think Neo needs here to come back from this?
I think really the only way Neo's coming back is with another Hot Agent. So it's just all about finding another copy of that card.
And yeah, unfortunately, that was not found. So the lifelink here, as I said, making completely difference because if there was not for lifelink, Paige could not probably play that Infernal Grasp that easily, and the game would just run a completely different course. But this way, just keeping attacking because she knows she will gain life and can afford to do so. And what do you think of underdog in this matchup?
I think this is a matchups like this is where underdog is at its best. Just any matchup where where you really want to be applying pressure and getting under the opponent. Underdog is, I mean, it's excellent to draw cards, but it's at its best where you can also use the front half as a 2 mana 3/2. And in this matchup, it really matters because Paige wants to uh, have early threats, pressure Neo to be on the back foot so that she can't protect her hot agent, and underdog is really good at applying that early pressure.
And here we see that Paige just attacks with all, and a Neo already at 3 life. Paige being able to cast things back from the grave. And I don't know what top deck Neo could have, but for sure Island is not it. And this is a good game. Unfortunately, Neo here not being able to deal with all the things that Esper Midrange were doing and just not being fast enough. How would you sideboard here, Arya, if you were the mono blue playing that now is on the play?
I think it's all about just it continues to be all about hot agent. Some fading hopes coming in recognition of the fact that Esper is sometimes able to have a pretty fast start, so you need to be able to answer that and maybe be interested in some shore ups to help protect hot agent. But really, there's not much in the sideboard that contributes to the game plan Neo wants to have in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm here seeing all the cards, and one that stands up to me, it's shore up, right? Being able to give X proof +1/+1 and untapping, it's really interesting, right? Would you side up that card?
I would definitely consider playing Shore Up in this matchup. Part of the problem, though, is that the Esper deck can be really aggressive, and the Mono Blue deck is very bad at playing from behind, and Shore Up is only exacerbating that problem. It's good at protecting your threats when you're ahead, but when you need to answer your opponent's threats and you're behind on board, Shore Up is kind of blank cardboard, and that makes it slightly awkward in this matchup.
And I think Neo had exactly the same thought as you because she decided not to side in the shore up. So a very interesting line of thinking there. And I completely agree. You have a great point there. And here on the Esper side, do you think there's any relevant change we are going to see?
Well, we saw the Duresses come in and the Wandering Emperor and AO come out, and I think that's pretty emblematic if the approach Esper wants to take in this matchup. You want to avoid having too many expensive, clunky threats that get countered by Make Disappear. So, Paige, recognizing that, taking out her 4 and 5 drops, even if they're powerful, and bringing in Duresses, plays very well with what Esper wants to be doing.
And here we are seeing the opening ends. It looks like both opening ends are reasonable, although Paige doesn't have a white source, right?
Yeah, and I think it's tempting to keep that hand, but smart play from Paige recognizing that one of the ways she loses is just not getting on the board enough early, and so she needs to mulligan hands like that, even if there's a lot of good cards in them.
Yeah, unfortunately, the second opening being one lander, so Paige needed to mull to five here. But this mull to five seems pretty reasonable, right, Arya?
Yeah, it's a little awkward that there's no creature to be played out on turn two because of the tap land. But aside from that, turn two Denic as your two drop in Phyrexian Missionary. That life gain we saw was really important last game, and is very much what you want to be doing in this matchup. Having threats that are really, really hard to race.
Exactly, and here we are already seeing the Delver turning, but a life flinker again on the other side, and Spell Pierce, which is a very interesting choice. Not probably not doing much right now, but might be decisive in the more late game.
Yeah, it's good in games where there's a threat that comes down early and Page's resources are already being tied up. In games like this, where it's gotten to this point and Page is still only playing at creatures, Spellpierce starts to fall off a little bit.
And here, Paige deciding, I'm just going to play all my creatures. I do have removal in hand in case you play one of your genes. So making some pressure here, making sure that the blue player needs to do something, right?
Yeah, and I mean, well, there's the Jin you mentioned, and that's really what you want to be doing. Force a blue player to do something because a lot of these cards, like Spellpierce, not good from behind.
And here we have Witness Protection, and Nair really considering playing it and still keeping the Spell Pierce up, which unfortunately it might not be enough against the evil since it's only 2 mana.
Yeah, and maybe in the spot, sometimes you can try and hope your opponent plays into a spell pierce by playing something first. But here, Paige has seen that spell pierce. It's revealed information, so because of the Delver, so she's definitely going to be able to play around it.
Definitely Spell Pierce becoming way worse when your opponent knows you have it. And here, like just some awkward blocks from Neo, the Jin blocking the 2-3, but still 5 damage passing. And slowly but surely, the lives are turning, and Page at 18 and Neo at 13 on the backhand, which is not ideal. What do you think Neo might need here?
So I think at this point, Neo just needs more threats and more protection. And I mean, we saw Paige not casting Destroy Evil that turn. And this might seem confusing to viewers because we know that there's nothing in Neo's hand that stops it. But from Paige's perspective, something like a slip out the back could be a real problem. So it's really important that she saves the Destroy Evil till a time where she can try and force it through. It's awkward for Neo to tap down to actually protect her Haughty Gen.
Exactly, really smart play by Paige here, and doing using the card in the end of the turn, also recognizing she can afford to lose some life. And now Rafine enters a negate in end.
Yeah, and Rafine is really backbreaking here because it's just absolutely impossible to race for Neo. There's just so much life being gained, or would be if Paige draws spells at some point.
Exactly. So Neo already at 6 life, and this Bankbuster trying to draw some cards. Even that terror is 4 mana, which is not ideal, right? Usually you want your terror to be 1, 2 mana,
Yeah,
but
and games like this are really awkward for the mono blue side, where you either draw too many creatures or too many instants or sorceries, where you draw too much of one half of your deck. And there's really not much that can be done about it. And sometimes one of the risks with the deck is sometimes your games will end up like this.
and we see a negate there, but then the spell pierce actually being used, and the game suddenly doesn't seem so straightforward anymore.
Yeah, the witness protection resolving negate being not quite castable through spell pierce there. Really awkward for Paige here because well, she doesn't have anything going on while Neo has this bankbuster and has this Hortigen, and so over a long game, Neo at this point is just going to take over. So Paige has to end it quickly.
And it looks like we have some blockers here. And what do you think of the decision here to not crew the Bankbuster? Would you have crewed the Bankbuster to block?
I think I really like Neo's play on that
Mm-hmm.
because she really doesn't want to lose her Bankbuster at this point. She's got a ton of land she's top decking, and she doesn't want to lose that one extra card from Bankbuster. It's really important. So I like the choice she made.
And here we see a Piddling Needle, which is a very interesting card. What do you think the Needle will name?
Needle's a little awkward here. It's good against something like Kaito or Wandering Emperor generally. There's not really anything to name here, unfortunately, because Blitz is an alternate casting cost, not an activated ability. So, and the same goes for the the same goes for Denix. So there's not really anything to name here.
Yeah, and I think Neo is realizing that, just reading the tenacious underdog, maybe trying to realize if the needle will stop it or not. Because
Yeah,
that would be a question I would have, to be honest. So maybe going through her mind there. And yeah, so Neo realized it doesn't work. So let's do the Wandering Emperor, which, to be honest, is the best card to be named with Pit Needle in this matchup, right?
yeah, definitely. Unfortunately for Neo, this underdog coming back and drawing maybe two cards every turn because of the Denic ability, uh, kind of troublesome over a long game.
Ooh, and we see here now that Paige has a Destroy Evil on the Gene, which is the only flyer. And now Danny can start attacking for 3 in the air. So this is a 1 turn clock here. Neo needs to top deck and out, and Island will not do it.
Yeah. And this is part of the problem we talked about with Tolarian Terra in this matchup, where, it's a good card, it's good rate, but against Esper, they have a lot of jump blockers, they have a lot of flyers to go over the top in the air on aggro, and that makes Terra not line up so well against things like Denic, Rafine, and AO.
And definitely here, this matchup goes to show how good Esper is and why is one of the most played decks right now. Really being very versatile. I think Neo trying to consider if there's any out, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, it does not look like it. If Paige attacks, this is going to be game.
And
Although Paige does not know what Neo might have.
yeah, unfortunately, there's not much in the mono blue deck that really punishes Page attacking. There's no flash flyers, so she might as well attack with the Denic. There's really nothing Neo could have.
Yeah, and Neo being a good sportsman here and just saying, like, good game. And this was our match number 3, and a 2-0 for Esper Midrange. Was this something you were expecting, or did it surprise that the blue deck could not keep up?
I mean, this is how the matchup will sometimes play out. I mean, we saw Neo draw a few too many lands, but the players navigated that really well. So definitely some really skillful plays on both sides. But this is one of the downsides of playing the mono blue deck, as it doesn't have that much actual card advantage, only card selection. So Esper definitely leveraging its strength in a way that is pretty typical of this matchup in the games where Esper wins.
And before we go into our last match of the day, cannot believe we're already going for the last one. This has been crazy and passing so fast. We have been having incredible matches today. I wanted to announce the giveaway again. So we are doing again this giveaway. So As a reminder, each giveaway is for one commander package for face-to-face tour weekend Toronto or Calgary. So you have to come to this event. It's an in real life event, so you have to attend to collect your prize. So you can choose between a free commander basic package or a free upgrade from basic to ultimate package, and you just have to type F2F in chat. And in the end of this last match, we will announce a winner. Would you like to receive one of these commander packages, Arya? Do
If
you play
only.
commander?
I play a little bit sometimes. I played some at Magic 30, but unfortunately, I'm not in Canada, so I won't be entering this giveaway. Also, we
Yeah,
would
exactly.
like it to go to someone in the community, but I don't. I envy the person who does get it because it's a pretty sweet giveaway. There's a lot of stuff in that basic package.
Yeah, and I think the commander decks have been like these precons have become better and better each time. Like the team that is designing it, big props to them because they are doing an amazing job of making these affordable and nice decks that can like just jumpstart your commander journey. And commander can be just a fun game to play, and I have a lot of fun playing it. So as Arya said, please only enter the giveaway if you know you can collect this in Canada and if you are attending this event, because unfortunately we cannot ship it to you. So don't forget this and only apply if you are able to collect it. We are going for the last match of the day here. January versus Zabracus. Zabracus being a streamer that I've actually watched a lot. She's an amazing streamer. And we have January here going with Enchantments. What do you think of this enchantment deck, Arya?
So this is a deck we've seen pop up a little bit in standard. I've seen there's been a few different versions of it. I've played some versions of it I've really liked, and I think it's a really powerful deck. Is the main thing it has going for it. It can just go over the top of a lot of decks in the mid game. Sometimes seen decks like this drawing their whole deck by turn 6, turn 7. But it is like a little slow to get on the board, so it can fall behind to early aggression, particularly if backed up by counter spells.
And here, one thing that January says about the deck is that she does like the versatility of it, and she mentions that the deck can be either aggressive or defensive. So there you can just tune in against the matchup that you are going to play. And here against Zabracus, it looks like she is going to play mono red. Which is a very interesting deck as well that I have not seen play recently. Have you seen mono red play in these last weeks?
I can't say I have. Mono red was once a staple of standard formats, but it's been a while since it's been good. And I mean, this is exactly the sort of matchup you want it for, right? This green white deck that can be a little slow to get on the ground and really struggle against the fast starts from mono red. So I do think I like Zabrak as a spot here.
I have to say I really like Zabracus' answer here. What do you like about your deck this week that is fast and does not have Wandering Emperor in it? Looks like Zab does not like the Wandering Emperor at all. And yeah, definitely it's going to be fun to watch such a different deck play and see if Mono Red does have a chance in standard. Let's go into the game and see what the players are going to do.
And
Yes.
one neat card from Zabracus's list that you don't see the sort of card often from mono red decks is the one copy of the Red Defiler. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested to see whether that comes up because there's a lot of one toughness creatures in January's deck, and Zabracus's deck just has a lot of one mana red permanents. So just letting her spew her hand almost instantly with that card could be interesting to see play out.
And we see here that Zab is a great end. And on the other side, January had to move to 5 and now doesn't have access right now to green source. Although the dog will draw a card, so maybe that will change. And January really wants a land here.
Yeah. And at this point for January, already a suboptimal start. You really want to be leading with that Kami of Transients, getting it down as early as possible to grow. So even if she draws a green land here, she's already suffered a little for having a slower start.
Yeah, and here we already have Zap starting to make some pressure, and suddenly January at 15. And we do have a second dog, which is not a bad draw, especially if it allows to get a land. And we do see the land. Exactly green mana like January needed. So these might change the course of the game. What do you think of Zab's hand here?
It's not ideal because Zabracus really wants another land. Oh, and that's the land.
I think you just called for it.
But yeah, Zabracus really wants to punish this stumbling from January, close the game before January has a chance to get her engines running with the many enchantment based cards. So at this point, her hand mostly cheap cards, probably what she wants to be seeing because there's really not much counterplay January has at the moment with her hand.
Yeah, and like it looks like Zab was not applying too much pressure, but suddenly January is at 11 already. Unfortunately, the perfect answer against Squee, because Squee does come back from the grave, but that enchantment just doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
Uh, Kumano becoming a creature now, which is another amazing thing from this card. And we know that Zab does have another Squee in it, so either Zab goes for Squee again, but now it can be double blocked with the dogs, or maybe with a different line.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how Zabracus's deck here leveraging the fact that is January's deck is a little flunky with that Squee getting an extra token, trading evenly for mana, and getting a little more board presence. And over here, choosing to play out multiple spells rather than just playing out one Squee, and knowing that she can maybe go under what January is doing, get on the board, and use that to try and get ahead in the early game, rather than playing like more expensive threats that can be one for one easily.
Exactly. And here, January add to double block with the dogs just to get rid of the Commando enchantment. And now January doesn't have a lot of enchantments going on, but she did draw a Naturalist, which is a great card against Mono Red because he does have lifelink.
Yep. And this is kind of a perfect draw for January because one way or another, she's going to get to cast two spells here. Still might be a little slow though for her, but given how low her life total is and how small the creature she's playing out would be.
Yeah, but definitely for 4 mana, being able to play a Naturalist and then having all these options between the Touch the Spirit Realm, between Wedding Announcement, or even Kami, it's really where this deck shines, right? If you have Naturalist and you're able to cast all these enchantments for so cheap, it's really good. And here, like again, the lifelink might be an obstacle for Zabracus to try to deal that last damage. And just a squeak coming down.
And yeah, now Zabracus is the one who's suffering because of the inability to do things by getting being gated on mana. And seeing this green white deck play out all its cards super efficiently, I think January is very much back in this.
Definitely. And now all the enchantments, as we saw, being super cheap, wedding announcement creating blockers, and that life link also turning a bit the game. Your lightning strike killing the Kami, and we do know Kami can come back eventually.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see Kami come back in a turn cycle or two when the naturalist dies. But for now, I still think January could be in decent shape. There's removal for that squee in hand, and just some other top end to go with the wedding announcement could let her establish a good board presence.
Unfortunately, here we see that a land was drawn by January, and this Thundering Raiju, if there's a land, it can turn the game completely. No land for Xavier might be a bit punishing, but at this point, January is on 5 life and needs to block.
Yeah. And Phoenix Chick, a fairly scary draw here just because I mean, it's an evasive flock. January is going to have to start gaining life with the naturalist to be able to not die to it. And that could be a problem because that would mean the naturalist isn't being left back as a blocker or is trading off. and that makes Phoenix check quite problematic in a long game.
Yeah, Zab really putting some pressure here, and January really needing some good draws. We see Kami here, and we do have a cycling from the land. But oh, another naturalist is pretty good again with the lifelink, but wedding announcement will turn make the creatures bigger, but I wonder if that's going to be enough.
I think it might be a little too slow at this point, particularly if there's a land for Zabracus.
No land here. Again, like Zav really wanting to probably put down that Raiju and start dealing a bunch of damage, but not being able to with the lack of lands. And really rough choice here for Zab that sees that she probably is falling a bit behind. And it's frustrating to see your opponent at such low life, but then not being able to just close the game.
Yeah, though I think with these two rabbit batteries on this Phoenix check, Zabracus should probably be threatening lethal in a turn cycle, so still not a bad spot to be in.
I think this is game, right? I don't see a way. Yeah, and January recognizing this and considering sacrificing the the land to draw a card.
Yeah, I think the only way January can win this is if Zabracus accidentally attacks with another creature to let January gain some life off the naturalist, but yeah, it's looking over.
Yeah, January recognizing here nothing she can do against that little chick, and chick winning the game, which is kind of funny. And it's a very a recent card, and a card I haven't seen played in constructed at all. So really fun choice here by Zab by bringing this mono red deck. And what do you think this aggro enchantment deck will bring now on the play?
So I think January wants to be bringing in just more efficient interactions, the circle of confinements. Tamiya's safekeeping may be interesting to protect her more important threats. Um, just beyond that, more cheap cards, the ability to play lower to the ground is really what January wants to be doing. Catilda in particular is maybe her most powerful card in the matchup, and she wants to leverage that as much as possible.
Yeah, we didn't see Catilda here, but being a very powerful card from the enchantment deck, and one of the reasons it this deck is played. And what about Zap here? Would you bring any of these cards from the side?
I think some of the early interaction is appealing. Like a braid seemed like a good idea, and strangles maybe. Just knowing the way January's deck wins is by a few early creatures slowly taking over the game and growing, and so being able to answer those creatures on curve with a braid and strangle is really important. So those both seem like tempting cards for Zabracus to bring in.
I completely agree. And here Zab really designing and deciding to come with these rendering flames, as you said, a great card here. And considering the Chandra, I see maybe considering removing one upgrade for this Chandra.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for Zabracus because there's all these cards she wants to bring in because they're good against January, but also her deck is fairly tight. There's not much ability to remove cards because you need to have a critical mass to play an aggressive game. So it's hard to find room for all these new cards she's trying to bring in.
Yeah, and it's not the easiest matchup, I would assume, for Zab, because January did move to five, right? So if January didn't move to five, the game would be completely different. And this red deck seems better against more slow decks and punishing like these more slower and greedy builds, not as much against these green white enchantments that just puts a bunch of creatures early on, gains life and everything.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a problem for Zabracus if January has one of those starts with an early generous visit, an early Kami, and really grows her board quickly. We saw, like you said, the mono red deck is good at punishing slower decks, and there's definitely some games where January's deck plays like that. When you're playing at Spirited Companion on 2 and Wedding Announcement on 3, then you can really get punished by the mono red deck. But if we see some of its more creature focused early hands, well, Zabracus could be in trouble.
I completely agree. And here, both openings being pretty reasonable and the both players keeping. I see that Zab has two Raijus in hand. And one fun fact about this card is it's not legendary. I don't know why in my head I would assume this card is legendary for some reason, but it's definitely not. So not a problem at all that Zab has two in hand. And who do you think is favored here based on the cards that they drew?
I think it really depends on how the next two turns turn out. If January can draw land and can maybe play Jukai Naturalist plus Mishiko's Reign of Truth, then she might be in good shape. Without that, it's more complicated.
Yeah, and here, like January, really considering if Naturalist should come down or if she should play something else and decides to go for the Naturalist. We know that Zab has removal, but is she going to use the Rendling Flame on the Naturalist? That's the question.
I think in Zabracus' spot, the Naturalist is just the scariest thing that January can have early. Just it making her whole deck just work much better on rate is such a huge problem. And we know that there's a Michiko's Rain in hand to pump it. And Zabracus knows there's many creatures like that, like the Generous Visitor to pump it. So it's not really a lifelinker like that is not really something you can afford to let stick around.
Yeah, and here January having a really good hand and a really good cards in hand, and this Mishigo just going to start going crazy. Uh, this dog suddenly a 4/4, but decides not to attack, recognizing that Zab can apply some pressure and deciding to be more on the defensive side. And it's fun because in the questionnaire we saw that January said that what she'd like about this deck is how versatile it is, how it can be attacking and defending, and we see it here, right? Because she could be starting to being in the aggressive position with this Mishigo, like with so many good cards in hand, but recognizing the threat that Sabi is applying and staying on defensive.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see whether January chooses to pivot over the next turn or two. With the second Mashigos coming down in particular, that's a lot of damage she could be offering. But there's also these wedding announcements that encourage a slower game, so it'll be interesting to see which direction she decides to take it in.
We also know that Zab does have Lightning Strike in case she wants to kill here something in response to Mishigo's ability. But deciding not to, and we have wedding announcement entering again. And this visitor suddenly putting a lot of counters.
Yeah. And I think Visitor at this point is just pretty scary because once you get to the point where it's putting multiple counters in a turn, it's just really, really hard for the mono red deck to keep up with.
Yeah, and Zab did recognize this and decided to lightning strike it before it starts putting too many counters. We do know that now there's mana for Raiju, and interesting to see if Zab will go for it or decides to take a different line since there is a 3/3 and a 1/1 to block.
Yeah, the timing of this is really awkward for Zabracus. I think trading her Raiju off two things from January is not what she wants to be doing. She wants to be getting in damage this turn, and maybe a turn earlier the Raiju would have been able to get in, but on this board it's pretty rough.
Yeah, but here Zab decides to go for it, knowing that she doesn't really have an alternative and having a second Raichu in hand. And it did went for damage, but now we know there's a touch of the Spirit Realm to exile that Raichu.
Yeah, and this next Raiju can't attack into this portrait of Mishiko, unfortunately. So, well played by January, recognizing that there's not the biggest rush for her to try and uh, deal with this Raiju. She can take for a turn with the knowledge that she's going to have bigger creatures, and these Raijus are soon going to be completely invalidated.
Exactly. And what do you think of this approach here of January of not attacking and staying defensive once again? Do you think it's a good strategy to like knowing I will win the late game, so let me just not make a mistake and lose because of it?
I think it's a good strategy for exactly the reason you laid out. At this point, with three wedding announcements, January is so far ahead in the late game. She really just needs to make sure she doesn't die quickly. So, staying defensive seems like an excellent idea.
And here, I think January considering if she wants to block with probably a Mishigo and a 1/1 and trade with a Raiju or just jump. And she does decide to double block, get rid of that Raichu, and Yeah, as you said, now Naturalist is the perfect draw because allows you to start casting 2 spells a turn, which is really relevant here. And
Yeah.
maybe we okay, not yet. I was like, maybe we start seeing a swing here from January side, but she decides to wait one more turn.
Yeah, I think this turn, it's part of the reason she might have done that is just knowing that getting an extra 2/2 off the wedding announcement is really valuable. If she attacks, then she ends up drawing cards instead of getting tokens. And I think in this spot, getting a token is much better for her.
I completely agree. And here Zab just like trying to make as much pressure as she can, but with so many tokens on January side, it becomes really difficult. And a play with fire.
Yeah, and at this point, I think the game is close to over. There's a Mishiko's that can gain January a lot of life by going on the natural list, and I don't think Zabracus can really come back from that.
This is 18 damage.
18. If January attacks with the whole team, it's 18. Though I think maybe I'd expect some slightly fewer attacks than that right
Yeah.
now, just to be a little careful.
But being if I was the mono red player, I would be really sad to see a 10-10 life linker attacking.
It's really the last thing you want to see, and the only thing more scary than it is the fact that January is going to get to do that again next turn if this lightning strike doesn't go with the naturalist.
Yeah, and Zab recognizing, okay, I need to get rid of this life linker because I cannot trace this, and attacking. So now either January just decides to take 4, not lose the dog, recognizing that next turn she's threatening lethal.
Yep. And this is going to force a jump lock on whatever January chooses to pump with the Mishikos because, uh, well, it's more than enough that Zabracus cannot block it.
Yeah, and here if January attacks with everything, even if there's a chump block on the biggest creature, it's still 7 damage that would go in and leaving Zab at 1. So here January decides just to attack with the 8/8 and just keep making more creatures with the wedding announcement. At this point, she's just having fun.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in Zabracus's deck that's going to get her out of this at this point.
Yeah, definitely not a mountain. And I think we are going to have a game number 3. But let's just see if January decides to attack with it all. Touch of the Spirit Realm, just being an overkill at this point.
And interestingly, because of Weaver of Harmony, Touch of the Spirit Realm can actually exile 2 things here. So it can exile both the Rabbit Battery and the Radha's Firebrand. So not that a blocker would have mattered for Zabracus, but really showing off the powerful endgame this deck has.
Yeah, definitely a nice line there that I actually didn't recognize, and it's really good. That card, just copying that effect, it's really interesting here. And Zab now on the play, I think needing to be more aggressive. What would you do differently here on the sideboard?
Yeah, I like that Zabracus is bringing in more 1 drops that affect the board, more 1 drops that let her start pushing damage. Definitely, like being on the play is when you want to leverage the clunkier draws this green white deck has. So bringing in going up on Phoenix Chicks, bringing in maybe some more 1 drops cutting on Abrades, let Zabracus play more to that aggressive game plan.
For sure. And here we are seeing the opening end. Unfortunately, January doesn't have too much. I mean, she does have a Kami and a touch of the Spirit Realm, but other than that, 5 lands might be a bit too much. She decides to mull. Zap having a decent opening and deciding to keep. Uh, Here, a keep for January as well, so a mull to 6. What do you think of these hands, Arya?
I think these hands are slightly beneficial to January in the way they line up. Normally, the very aggressive hands from the mono red decks that play to the board a lot can really punish a hand like this. But since there's not permanents that are coming down, well, other than this now Phoenix trick, it's really hard for it can be really awkward when the mono red deck doesn't apply pressure and the green white deck just gets to do its thing.
I completely agree. And here, January considering playing the naturalist, knowing that probably Zab might have some removal, and deciding to go with the dog instead, with the spirited companion. The only companion we can see in standard now.
And really heads up play from January there, recognizing that she wants to get value off naturalist immediately in the turn she plays it. So holding it until she can play it in another spell guarantees that one way or another, Zabracus is trading down on mana a little bit.
Exactly. So completely agree with you. Being able to turn three, being able to cast this spell that had to be removed with Lightning Strike and getting the cheek as well, and keeping the dog behind. Because January took a bit of damage already at 12, right? So interesting to see here if she's going to block and she decides to do so, recognizing like the way she loses is damage coming through early on. And this Chandra is dressed to kill.
Yeah, and normally Chandra not at her best in this matchup. So there's definitely some board states where she can struggle a little. But this board state with nothing, just letting Zabracus deal more damage or draw more cards, really scary, I think. And definitely something January has to deal with sooner rather than later.
For sure. And I saw that at Magic 30 there were some nice cosplays of this Planeswalker. And Raishu coming, and that's a card that January does not want to see when she's at 11 life.
Yeah, I think at this point things are looking pretty grim for January. It's really hard to keep up with the Raiju that's presenting damage, the Chandra that you need to start attacking, and dealing with both those things at the same time seems very, very difficult. And in a few turns, we might see a Chandra ultimate just ending the game.
Exactly. Two Wedding Announcing is really good, and January was able to drop two spells this turn, but it might not be enough to go against that. Just Raiju starting to deal so much damage. And we see that Zab has so many cards in hand. A Braid being able to deal with Kami, and just another Chandra in hand as well, just as a backup. And looking really good for Zab here. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good spot for her to be in. I've mentioned Chandra Ultimate maybe ending the game. I don't know if the game's even going to go that long because Zabracus really getting far ahead on board, and there's not much January can do to deal with that. There's not much her deck has in terms of comeback tools when you're dealing with this much pressure.
Yeah, for sure, not looking too good for January, but being very well played from both players. And January, like really keeping it defensive. And I think she's been playing really well throughout these matches.
Yeah, unfortunately, Lightning Strike means the game is probably going to end this turn one way or another. Between that and the Raiju's ability and this Phoenix check,
Yeah,
it's
and
probably lethal.
this play with fire also not helping, and lightning strike. Really good game here from both players, and really excited to see mono red winning, to be honest, since it's a deck that has not been playing much. Does this surprise you, Arya?
I think Monored is maybe pretty well set up to beat these decks to try and go over the top of the mid-range decks. So it would be interesting to see maybe if there's more control coming in with Brothers War. There's Monastery Swiftspear coming out, which seems like a really, really good card for Mono Red. It'd be interesting to see whether Mono Reds may be able to make it back into the meta. As Zabracus showed us, it's at least somewhat playable right now, and I'd expect it to only get better going into the future.
Congratulations to Zap to winning the week 2 of VML season 8. And I think we might have a winner for our giveaway for the free commander basic package or a free upgrade from basic to ultimate package. So I'll be announcing that really soon. What do you thought of the matches that we had today, Arya? Any highlights you want to point out?
I mean, I can't forget that lightning strike off the top from Freddie for lethal, but some really impressive play from our players, and also again last week we saw five color humans decks, a bunch of other rogue brews winning, and we saw that again this week. We saw Jund beat the more established Grixis. We saw Gruul beat Esper, and so really testament to the brewers among our VML players, how that we managed to see so many of these new innovative decks managing to hold their own and even win a lot against these more established black-based mid-range decks.
For me, the highlight is to see that in the 3 matches we saw 5 different decks, which is really, as you said, showing that the meta game for standard right now is really diverse, which is something we didn't have always in the past. So it's really nice to see that the VML players are being creative, and it's really nice to see the high level of play that we have been seeing week after week. And clearly players preparing, caring for sideboard, making their lists unique in their own way. And do we have any winner to announce for this giveaway here? So we do have a winner. I'm not sure I did get the name correctly, so I will ask to repeat it, please, because it's not. Okay, I got it now. So drum roll. The winner is, it's Astrid A. So congratulations on winning, and I hope you have a lot of fun playing at either Toronto or Calgary. Hopefully you have an amazing weekend, and I think this is a wrap up for week 2 of the VML. I had so much fun casting. It was the first time here on the VML. Arya being a great co-host here. It was a pleasure casting with you, Arya. And we would like to thank our sponsors, Good Luck, i5, and Wizards of the Coast. Without them, it would be not possible to do these streams. Also, thanks for the rates that came in the stream. We're really appreciating you deciding to sending our viewers to us. And thank you so much, everyone that has been watching the stream. I hope you all enjoyed it. Anything you want to say, Arya, as a goodbye?
No, not really. I had a great time casting with you today. It's really great to see this come full circle. Filipa and I were tested together for the first VML I played and won. So it's really a coming full circle casting with you, and it's been such a blast. I thank you for the stream, and thanks all our viewers for sticking by.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week, 6 p.m. Pacific time, Friday, as always.